Okay, let's dive in. We're looking today at a really, a profoundly challenging legal story. It's this kind of jarring split screen, justice on one side, injustice on the other. The saga of Stephen Avery.
He really is, in a lot of ways, a unique test case for the American judicial system. Here's a man who was, well, verifiably exonerated. DNA proved it. A serious sexual assault charge.
A clear win for technology for the wrongfully convicted.
Exactly. But then he's also the same man later convicted of first-degree murder. In that case,
Right.
it's still intensely disputed, full of allegations about conflict of interest, maybe even evidence tampering.
And that dual identity, the proven victim of a system failure and the convicted killer, that's the knot we really need to try and untangle for you today.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of sources covering, well, everything. His entire legal history, the reforms that came out of that first case, the Teresa Halbach murder trial, and these constant ongoing appeals his team keeps filing.
So our mission here isn't about deciding guilt or innocence. We're not retrying the case.
No, not at all. We want to pull out those key nuggets of knowledge from the sources. Really unpack the timeline, pinpoint where the system went wrong back in '85.
And understand why that initial failure really hangs over everything that happened later, especially the questions about evidence in the 2005 murder case.
Right, because it compromises the integrity, you could argue.
So why should you, listening right now, care about this? Well, it's more than just another true crime story. It's a really critical look at how eyewitness testimony can be incredibly devastatingly wrong.
And how forensic science isn't always black and white, how it can be debated, and what happens when the whole idea of reasonable doubt gets tangled up because the same local police department involved has this prior proven history of misconduct.
It's a deep dive into the mechanics of the justice system itself.
Okay, so to really get the intensity of what happens later, you've got to start with Avery's background. Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, born in 1962.
And his family, they ran Avery's Auto Salvage out in Gibson, right? Since 65.
Hmm?
That salvage yard, it becomes central to both cases. It's the physical location for everything.
It really is. And we should probably touch on the personal context, too, the stuff documented in the sources. A lawyer back in 1985 mentions school records, IQ of 70.
Right, which puts him in that low-end intellectual functioning bracket. His mom even confirmed he went to an elementary school for slower kids. Seems like he really struggled academically.
Definitely. And his legal issues started pretty early on.
Yeah, 1981, he's 18, convicted for burglarizing a bar, got 10 months for that.
And then there's that incident in 1982.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty disturbing, the animal cruelty charge.
Pouring gas and oil on his cat, throwing it in a bonfire. He was jailed until August 83 for that one. Later, he apparently just dismissed it, saying he was young and stupid.
Which, maybe he was, but it paints a picture, It's part of his history leading up to the big one.
And the really crucial event before the wrongful conviction happens in January 85.
Ah, right. He runs his cousin's car off the road, points a gun at her.
He claimed she was spreading rumors, but the charges were serious. Endangering safety while evincing a depraved mind, plus the firearm charge. Got 6 years for that eventually.
But the key thing, the absolute key, is that he was out on bail for that felony when Penny Burnson was attacked.
Exactly. July 1985. Penny Burnson attacked, sexually assaulted on a Lake Michigan beach, and Avery gets arrested. Why? Because she picked him from a photo lineup and then a live lineup.
And this is where you start seeing the system failures piling up almost immediately.
Because he had an alibi. A really strong one, right?
Yeah, a time-stamped receipt. 16 eyewitnesses confirming he was like 40 miles away in Green Bay very shortly after the attack happened.
16 people. And a receipt.
Despite all that, he gets convicted. Rape, attempted murder, sentenced to 32 years. And his appeals. Denied in 87, denied again in 97.
It wasn't just ignoring the alibi, though. The sources point to something more active, like the system deliberately burying information.
Well, yeah. Around 1995, so he's been inside for about 10 years, a detective from a neighboring county, Brown County, calls the Manitowoc County Jail.
What about?
Says an inmate there admitted to the Burnson assault, said he was surprised someone else was doing time for it.
Wow. So what happened with that call?
Apparently, it got transferred. And here's the really damning part, according to later recollections from deputies. The sheriff at the time, Thomas Kukurik, supposedly said, and this is a quote, "We already have the right guy. Don't concern yourself with it."
So potentially 8 years into Avery's sentence, the leadership knew there was credible evidence pointing elsewhere, and they just ignored it.
That's the allegation. Actively chose to ignore it. which suggests, an institutional motive to keep Avery locked up.
It took science, DNA, to finally break through that.
Right. 2002, the Wisconsin Innocence Project steps in. They used DNA testing, wasn't available back in '85, obviously, and bingo, confirms Avery is innocent.
And identifies the actual attacker.
Gregory Allen. And this guy, Allen, is a crucial piece of the puzzle.
How so?
Well, for starters, he looked a lot like Avery. A striking resemblance, apparently. But more than that,
Yeah.
Allen had actually committed another assault at the very same beach before. And get this. He was under police surveillance around the time of the Bernsen attack because of his history with women.
Wait, so the police knew about him, knew he was a risk at that location, and he looked like Avery.
Exactly. But was he ever put in the lineup shown to Penny Bernsen? Nope. Never considered a suspect, apparently.
Unbelievable. So Allen was the known danger, the physical match right there, but they focused solely on Avery, the guy with the alibi.
And because the statute of limitations had run out by the time the DNA proved it was him, Allen was never charged for the Bernsen assault. He's serving time now, but for something else entirely.
So Avery walks free. September 11th, 2003. After 18 years for a crime he didn't commit. Some of that time was concurrent with the earlier sentence, but still, 18 years gone.
Comes out divorced, estranged from his family. 18 years just stolen because the system failed.
And that failure, that massive, undeniable, wrongful conviction, it caused a huge stir in Wisconsin. People were demanding change.
Absolutely. It led directly to legislative action. A state representative, Mark Gundrum, put together a bipartisan task force. Their whole job was to figure out how to stop this from happening again.
And they came up with real reforms.
Oh, yeah. Big ones. Things like totally revamping how eyewitness identifications are done, requiring sequential lineups instead of showing everyone at once, which can be suggestive.
Makes sense.
And new rules for interrogations, how evidence is collected, how it's stored, really trying to tighten things up.
And this package of reforms became known as
The Avery Bill, signed into law October 2005. Fitting name, right? He was the catalyst.
But then the timing, the twist.
Yeah, this is where it gets almost surreal. Just 1 month after the Avery Bill is signed, November 2005, it gets renamed. Suddenly, it's just the Criminal Justice Reform Bill.
Why?
Because that's right when Steven Avery gets charged with the murder of Teresa Halbach.
Wow. So the state basically scrubbed his name off the reform he inspired the second he became a suspect again.
Looks that way. Politically, they distanced themselves immediately. And maybe it wasn't just politics, maybe it was also about the money.
Ah, right. The lawsuit. He didn't just walk free and say thank you.
Not even close. He filed a massive civil suit, $36 million against Manitowoc County, against former Sheriff Kokorek, against the former DA Dennis Vogel, seeking damages for those 18 years.
$36 million. That's enormous pressure for a local county government. And for the individuals named, the ones accused of ignoring the evidence that could have freed him.
Exactly. That lawsuit was hanging over everything when Teresa Halbach disappeared. It's the backdrop you can't ignore. And the sources showed that lawsuit was eventually settled.
But only after he was charged with murder, right?
Yeah, settled for $400,000 in February 2006. Much, much less than the $36 million he was asking for initially. The murder charge changed everything.
So that shadow of the wrongful conviction and the lawsuit, it just looms large over this next part. October 31st, 2005. Halloween. Photographer Teresa Halbach goes missing.
Her last known stop, Avery's property, right there near the Avery Auto Salvage Yard. She was taking pictures of his sister's minivan for Autotrader.com.
And the evidence starts pointing towards Avery pretty quickly.
It does. Her car, the RE4, is found on the salvage yard property, kind of hidden. Inside, they find bloodstains. DNA testing matches them to Steven Avery.
And then there were the bone fragments.
Right. Charred bone fragments found later in a burn pit near Avery's trailer. Some were eventually identified as hers.
Avery gets arrested November 11th, 2005. Charged with murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, mutilating a corpse, felon in possession of a firearm. The works.
And his response? From day one.
Frame up. He insisted it was all a setup by Manitowoc County officials to kill his $36 million lawsuit and discredit him permanently.
And the potential mechanism for that alleged frame-up, it was kind of built into how the investigation was handled, wasn't it?
Yeah. Because of the lawsuit, Manitowoc County officially handed the murder investigation over to the neighboring county, Calumet County, to avoid the conflict of interest.
That was the idea anyway. Step back, let someone else handle it.
But it wasn't that clean-cut. The sources say Manitowoc deputies were still involved. They participated in searches of Avery's trailer, his garage, the property.
under the supervision of Calumet officers, technically. But Manitowoc boots were on the ground. The very people Avery was suing were searching his home for evidence in a murder case.
The defense jumped all over that, argued it was an unavoidable conflict, that the evidence chain was potentially tainted from the start.
And the piece of evidence that really seemed to crystallize that fear for the defense came on November 8th during one of those searches.
Involving Manitowoc officers again.
Yes. Specifically, Lieutenant James Lang and Sergeant Andrew Colborne. Both were set to be deposed, questioned under oath, in Avery's civil suit. They were present during a search of Avery's tiny bedroom.
And that's when they found
The key. The key to Teresa Halbach's RV4. Found allegedly lying on the floor near Avery's slippers.
after multiple previous searches of that same small trailer by different teams had found nothing.
Exactly. Days of searching by various law enforcement groups. Then Lank and Colborne are there, and suddenly, there's the key.
The defense cried foul immediately. Planted evidence.
And their argument wasn't just, oh, these guys had a motive. It was the specifics. The key was found in a pretty obvious spot. It didn't have much, if any, DNA on it. Not Halbach's, not Avery's, really.
Which is weird if someone's handling a key, right?
Right. And it was found by these specific Manitowoc officers with a direct stake in the civil suit after other searches missed it. It looked bad. It fed directly into that narrative of evidence tampering.
And that narrative got even stronger, almost horrifyingly so, when the defense found out about a vial of Avery's blood.
Ah, yeah, the blood vial. This was blood taken from Avery way back in 1996 during his appeals for the first case, the wrongful conviction. It was stored in an evidence box.
And the box wasn't sealed properly.
The defense discovered the evidence box had been opened. It wasn't sealed. And they looked closely at the vial itself and saw what looked like a fresh puncture mark in the rubber stopper.
Oh, wow. The implication being
Chilling. That the blood found in Teresa Halbach's car, a critical piece linking Avery to the crime scene, could have been taken from this old, stored vial and planted in the car.
connecting the two cases in a very direct, physical way. If true, it's proof of planting.
It was a bombshell accusation. The prosecution absolutely had to counter it.
So they brought in the FBI and this EDTA test.
Right. They needed science to refute the planting theory.
Uh,
So FBI technicians testified about a test they used, apparently developed specifically for the Avery trial, to look for something called EDTA.
okay, break that down. EDTA is.
Ethylene ediamine tetracetic acid. It's a chemical preservative. They put it in those purple-top tubes used to collect blood samples in labs to stop the blood from clotting.
Like the vial from 1996 would have had.
Exactly. But, and this is the crucial part, EDTA is not naturally found in the human body. So the prosecution's logic was, if the blood in the RI-4 came from that vial, it must contain EDTA.
And the FBI said.
They tested samples of the blood from the car, and they testified they found no EDTA. Their conclusion: the blood was fresh from an active bleed by Avery around the time of the murder, not planted from the old vial.
Case closed, evidence planting debunked.
Well, not so fast, according to the defense.
Yeah.
They hit back hard on this EDTA test.
Ah,
They argued first that this novel test hadn't been properly validated by outside labs. It was kind of cooked up just for this case. And second, they pointed out the FBI only tested a minuscule amount of the blood stain.
so maybe they just missed it.
That was the argument. If blood was planted from the vial, maybe it was diluted somehow, or maybe the tiny sample tested just happened not to pick up the trace amounts of EDTA. So instead of settling the issue, the EDTA test just became another scientific battleground. More doubt, more questions.
So, despite all these questions swirling around the key, the blood vial, the bone fragments, Avery's trial went ahead. Calumet County.
Right. Some charges were dropped before trial: kidnapping, sexual assault. Those went away in January 2007.
And the prosecution, led by the Calumet DA, Ken Kratz, they pushed forward with the murder charge.
And they got a verdict in March 2007. Guilty. First-degree intentional homicide and illegal possession of a firearm.
But interestingly, not guilty on the charge of mutilating a corpse.
Yeah, that acquittal is interesting. It suggests maybe the jury wasn't fully convinced by the prosecution's story about how the body was disposed of, the burning and all that. But they were convinced enough on the murder itself.
The sentence.
Life in prison. No possibility of parole for the murder. Plus 5 years for the gun charge, running concurrently. He went straight to maximum security. Though recently, in 2022, he was moved to a medium security place, Fox Lake.
But Avery wasn't the only one convicted. The prosecution's case also relied heavily on his nephew, Brendan Dassey.
Ah, Brendan Dassey. His story is It's just heartbreaking, and it raises huge questions about police interrogation and false confessions.
He was charged in March 2006, right, as
And
an accessory.
yeah, he was 16 at the time. And, like Avery, sources mentioned he had documented intellectual limitations. He confessed, after hours and hours of interrogation, to helping Avery kill Halbach and dispose of her body.
That confession was key for the prosecution.
Absolutely. But Dassey later recanted. So the whole thing was coerced, that the investigators basically fed him the story.
Did he testify at Avery's trial?
No, he refused. But his confession, even though recanted, was definitely part of the atmosphere. He had his own separate trial.
And he was convicted?
Yes. Convicted of murder, rape, and mutilation of a corpse. Also got a life sentence.
His case then went through years of appeals, focusing on that confession.
Right. His lawyers filed what's called a writ of habeas corpus in federal court. They argued his original lawyer was ineffective, but the main thrust was that the confession was coerced, involuntary.
And a federal judge actually agreed.
He did. In August 2016, federal magistrate Judge William E. Duffin overturned Dassey's conviction. Huge news. He wrote a really detailed decision saying the confession was involuntary.
What were his reasons?
Several things. Dassey's age, his low IQ, the fact that investigators used really leading questions, basically suggesting answers to him. And they kept assuring him everything would be okay if he just told them what they wanted to hear. Plus, he was questioned multiple times without a lawyer or parent present.
Sounds like a classic coerced confession scenario.
Judge Duffin certainly thought so. He called it a textbook example of investigators taking advantage of a vulnerable kid.
But the state of Wisconsin fought back.
Immediately.
Yeah.
They appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. Initially, a 3-judge panel actually agreed with Judge Duffin and upheld the overturning of the conviction.
So it looked like Dassey might go free.
For a moment. But then the state asked for something called an en-banc review. That means the entire Seventh Circuit Court, all 7 judges, would rehear the case together.
And what happened then?
They reversed it. In a really close 4-3 vote, the full Seventh Circuit decided that, under the existing legal rules, the police had obtained the confession properly. They reinstated Dassey's conviction.
4-3, that's incredibly close.
It really highlights how debatable this was, even among high-level judges. 4 thought it was okay, 3 strongly dissented, arguing it was coerced. That split itself shows how questionable the confession remains.
And the Supreme Court?
Dassey's team appealed, but the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case in June 2018. So the 4-3 decision stands.
Meaning Brendan Dassey is still in prison?
Still in prison. He keeps applying for parole, but legally his conviction holds. It's a really tragic part of this whole story.
Beyond Dassey's confession, there were also questions raised about the jury in Avery's trial, right? Especially after that documentary series came out.
Yeah, some reports surfaced that made people raise eyebrows about who was on that jury.
Like what?
Well, one juror was apparently the father of a Manitowoc County sheriff's deputy, and another juror, his wife worked as a clerk for Manitowoc County.
Okay, so direct connections to the very department Avery was accusing of framing him.
Exactly. Even if those specific people weren't involved in the lawsuit or the investigation, the defense argued it created an appearance of bias, a potential conflict of interest, right there in the jury box.
And there were disputes about the deliberations, too.
There were. A juror who got dismissed, Richard Mahler, went public later. He claimed that initially, 7 jurors were leaning towards not guilty. He said he was mystified how it ended up as a guilty verdict.
Did other jurors agree with that?
No, others disputed his account. Some said there wasn't an early formal vote like that, or if there was an informal count, it was more like 3 not guilty, not 7. So conflicting stories there, too.
And wasn't there a claim about intimidation?
There was. Another juror supposedly told the documentary filmmakers they felt pressured, even scared, into voting guilty, worried about their own safety if they didn't. But again, that specific claim has also been disputed by others.
So conflicts about the jury makeup, conflicts about how deliberations went down. It just adds another layer of uncertainty to that conviction.
It absolutely does.
And the legal fight didn't stop with the conviction. Avery got a new lawyer in 2016, Kathleen Zellner, who's known for overturning wrongful convictions.
Right, and she came in swinging, filed a new appeal right away, arguing due process violations, saying officials searched way beyond what their warrants allowed.
She seems to focus heavily on re-examining the forensic evidence and finding alternative theories.
Definitely. In June 2017, she filed this enormous document, like 12,272 pages, a post-conviction motion. It laid out a ton of arguments.
Like what?
Claims that Avery's original trial lawyers were ineffective. and really focusing on alleged Brady violations.
Okay, remind us Brady violation means.
It means the prosecution has a duty to turn over any evidence they have that could help the defendant that's favorable to the accused. Exculpatory evidence.
And Zellner claimed they didn't do that.
She accused the prosecution, particularly Ken Kratz, of withholding crucial stuff, evidence that might have pointed away from Avery or maybe discredited the state's main witnesses or their timeline.
Did she offer new forensic takes too?
Oh, yeah. Affidavits from experts arguing the prosecution's whole story of how Halbach died and was burned just didn't fit the physical evidence found. She asked for a whole new trial based on all this ethics problems, potentially planted evidence, withheld evidence.
How did the courts react to that massive filing?
Initially, denied. Just flat out denied without even holding a hearing to listen to the evidence.
Ouch.
But Zellner kept pushing. And she got a significant win, procedurally at least, in February 2019. The Wisconsin Court of Appeals agreed to send the case back down to the trial court.
What for?
For an evidentiary hearing. Basically, the appeals court said, okay, there are enough legitimate questions raised here that the lower court needs to actually hold a hearing, listen to the witnesses, look at the evidence Zellner is presenting.
That's a big deal, right? Getting a hearing.
It is. It meant the court saw enough potential merit to take a closer look. Zellner was clearly thrilled. She actually announced it on social media, posting something like, Avery update, we won, back to the circuit court, and added things like truth wins, and mentioned making a murderer, very public about it.
Now, one of the most controversial parts of her appeal strategy involves those bone fragments, doesn't it?
Hugely controversial, and legally really complex. In 2018, she filed a motion specifically about bones found not just in Avery's burn pit, but in other burn piles located in a quarry owned by Manitowoc County nearby.
These were just suspected human bones.
Right, and she wanted them tested for Teresa Halbach's DNA using newer, more sensitive technology, like the kind they use to identify victims in disasters, like the California wildfires. She specifically mentioned one fragment looked like a pelvic bone.
Okay, so testing those could potentially show Halbach's remains were moved or maybe weren't burned where the state claimed.
Exactly. It could blow a hole in the prosecution's timeline and crime scene narrative. But then came the twist.
Which was?
Zellner found out the state had already given those specific quarry bones back to the Halbach family.
They gave potential evidence back before it could be tested with new tech.
That's what Zellner discovered. And her legal team argued this action itself suggested the state believed the bones were human remains belonging to Teresa. Otherwise, why give them to her family?
So what was the legal argument based on that?
Zellner filed another motion, arguing this is a violation of Arizona v. Youngblood.
Okay, another legal term, Youngblood violation.
It deals with the state's duty to preserve evidence. Basically, the Youngblood rule says if the police fail to preserve evidence that might have helped the defense, potentially exculpatory evidence, it's only a constitutional violation if the defense can prove the police acted in bad faith, like they intentionally destroyed it to hide something.
So Zellner argued giving the bones back was bad faith.
She called it a very sneaky way to get evidence destroyed. Basically, give them back under the cover of respecting the family, knowing full well it prevents future testing that might help Avery. She argued finding Halbach's bones in the quarry away from Avery's burn pit would create huge reasonable doubt.
And she also claimed the original defense didn't even know about these quarry bones.
Yeah, she added that the state had allegedly failed to disclose the records, the ledger sheet, about those specific bones to Avery's first lawyers. Another potential Brady violation layered on top.
So all these efforts, the massive motions, the bone controversy, has it led anywhere concrete, like a new trial?
Not yet. Despite everything, the courts have largely pushed back. In July 2021, the Wisconsin Court of Appeals again affirmed the lower court's denial of Zellner's big brief. They even criticized it, saying it contained many misrepresentations of the facts.
But Zellner's still filing motions.
Oh, yeah. August 2022, another one, 149 pages this time, claiming she has new witnesses.
Pointing the finger elsewhere.
Specifically, this motion claimed the new evidence would directly link Bobby Dassey, that's Brendan's brother, to the murder of Teresa Halbach. So, doubling down on alternative suspects and continuing to argue the prosecution hid evidence.
It just keeps going. And of course, all of this legal maneuvering happens against this backdrop of intense media attention.
Huge media attention. Even before the big series, you had things like that Radiolab episode back in 2013, Reasonable Doubt, which focused on Penny Burnson and the first wrongful conviction.
But then came Netflix, Making a Murderer. Late 2015, Season 2 in 2018. That blew the case up globally.
Absolutely. It put a massive spotlight on the evidence tampering allegations, the questions about police conduct, Brendan Dassey's confession. It reached millions.
And that spotlight had real-world consequences, even legally.
It did. Andrew Colborn, the Manitowoc officer involved in finding the key, sued Netflix and the filmmakers for defamation in 2018. So they twisted facts to make him look corrupt.
What happened with that lawsuit?
It was ultimately dismissed in 2023. But it shows how high the stakes got because of the documentary's narrative.
And of course, where there's a popular narrative, there's often a counter-narrative.
Right. In 2023, the Daily Wire put out Convicting a Murderer, basically arguing the Netflix show was biased, left out key evidence pointing to Avery's guilt, and presented a skewed picture. So, the media battle continues.
It's not just media battles, though. There are personal ones, too. Avery's ex-fiancée, Jody Stachowski, she changed her story.
Dramatically. She was shown supporting him in the first season of the documentary. But in 2016, she gave an interview saying that support was all an act.
And she said she believes he's guilty.
She did. Said she believes he's not innocent of the Halbach murder. And she made some really disturbing allegations against him personally. Claimed he threatened her family.
There was that quote.
Yeah, she told the interviewer, Avery said something like, "All bitches owe him because of the one Burnson that sent him to prison the first time. We all owed him and he could do whatever he wanted." She called him a monster and said he's the one person she can't trust.
That's incredibly damaging testimony from someone who knew him so well at the time.
Yeah.
It adds a whole other dimension beyond just the legal arguments.
It really does. It complicates the picture immensely. You have the system potentially failing him, but then you have these deeply troubling personal accounts too.
And the public reaction after the documentary was huge. Petitions, right?
Yeah, White House petitions asking for pardons for Avery and Dassey got hundreds of thousands of signatures.
But the president can't pardon state crimes.
Exactly. The White House had to respond and clarify that. Pardons would have to come from the governor of Wisconsin. And the governor at the time, Scott Walker, made it very clear he would not be pardoning Steven Avery.
So here we are, back where we started almost. This incredible tension.
It really is.
Yeah.
You have one man, two completely different legal outcomes from basically the same system in the same place.
Huh.
First, he's the poster child for wrongful conviction. Freed by DNA after 18 years, lost to state failure.
Clear victim of the system.
Undeniably. But second, he's convicted of murder. Found guilty based largely on circumstantial evidence where almost every key piece, the key, the blood, the bones, the confession involved, has had serious questions raised about its integrity, about potential planting or coercion, about preservation.
So, reflecting on all this, how do you even reconcile it? You have this established, proven history of systemic failure by Manitowoc officials in the first case. That failure was so bad, it led to statewide reforms, the Avery Bill.
Right.
And then in the very next major case involving Avery, you have all these serious allegations of evidence tampering, conflicts of interest, potentially destroyed evidence involving some of the same entities. Given that history, how does the justice system find closure for Teresa Halbach's family? That's desperately needed. But how do they balance that against the absolute need to remove all reasonable doubt, especially for defendants like Avery and Dassey, when the foundation of the state's case feels so shaky because of that history?
It's the core dilemma. Where does the burden of proof truly lie when the people investigating the crime are the same ones who previously failed so badly and who had a massive financial and reputational stake in the outcome this time, when the evidence itself is so hotly contested?
That question, that fundamental doubt about the integrity of the process itself, that's the challenge this case leaves us with. What does justice look like when the system itself is under such a deep cloud of suspicion? That's something for you to think about.